And getting back to federal politics, the National Party Room has met this morning as part of negotiating this deal with the coalition, with the Liberal Party, for a coalition agreement. But is it intractable? After this election loss, should the parties be taking a bit of a break from each other? Joining me now is former Liberal MP Jason Falinski, who thinks they should be doing just that. Jason, why?
Hey Laura, how are you? Because I just don't think it's been a good deal for the Liberal Party for a number of decades now. One of the structural weaknesses of the coalition is that the leader of the Liberal Party is the leader of the coalition, and the Liberal Party doesn't have anyone standing up for it. And we saw the result at the last election, which is now we have one seat in a city, which is Goldstein, which is Tim Wilson, who won it back from a Teal. If Giselle Capitarian, who I'm still hopeful will win with a recount and once the preferences are allocated, will win, but that'll be two seats. In the last three elections, we have seen the Liberal Party reduced to nothing in the cities. Now, you can't win government unless you're winning seats in the cities. And the National Party, as Matt Canavan and Colin Boyce said at the last election, it's not their concern whether the Liberal Party is winning seats in the city, and it shows.
Yeah, it does. In Queensland, we should remind people as well that it's an actual merged entity. It is the LNP in Queensland. They just sit in separate party rooms. You could say that also in the Northern Territory as well with the Country Liberal Party. But how do you go about extrapolating that at a structural level? I mean, it's not super hard to do, but to concentrate on the structure of the parties, getting candidates in is part of the big problem that both of them need to solve. But, I mean, if they do split as well, Jason, just on numbers, aren't both of them weakened?
Yeah, look, we are. There's no doubt that the best outcome here would be a properly functioning coalition. But the fact is it's not properly functioning. You only have to look at the election results to see that. So the fact of the matter is we need to take a break. We need a reset. The National Party, instead of realising the damage that has been done, seems to have just doubled down on its strategy of squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. You had the leader of the National Party, David Littleproud, flying to Albury to make demands of the Liberal Party leader who was, sitting by her dying mother's bed at the time. I mean, this is not a party that seems to recognise that what hasn't worked in the past isn't going to work into the future. So Kevin Hogan made it very clear yesterday that that doesn't matter to him and it doesn't matter to the National Party. And I think the Liberal Party should just say, look, it's not working for us anymore. Perhaps we should all take a break from each other and reconsider our positions.
So, yeah, it's been a really difficult time for Susan Lee, but are you suggesting David Littleproud flew to Albury at the wrong time? I mean, he wouldn't have done that without the invitation of Susan Lee, I'm assuming.
I don't know is the answer, Laura, but It's a great question that you're asking there.
OK, well, let's get to the structure of things. And the Teals in particular, this was, this is not a flash-in-the-pan phenomenon now. You know that very well. At the election before last, the Teals came in that big wave and really changed the Liberal Party in many ways, where your base is. Now, for a second election, as we know, history shows that once you do have an independent in the seat, it's very hard to kick them out. And I think we have two elections now that show that the Teals aren't just going to disappear, and it's something that the Liberal Party need to grapple with. What is your view on how the Liberal Party needs to deal with the Teals? I mean, that they are opponents, absolutely, but they're eating into their base as well. And I don't think they can just be dismissed as Greens disguised as Teals anymore. There's some Teal candidates or Teal MPs that, a decade ago would have been Liberal Party candidates. Not all of them, but some of them. So, Jason, how do you deal with the Teals? Do you start, being more friendly with them? Do you start doing deals? And I accept that it is hard to do because they don't call themselves a party, which, effectively they are in some ways.
Laura, I find myself in a very difficult position, an uncomfortable position of having to disagree with you, so I apologise.
OK, take it away.
Take it away. Look, in answer to how the Liberal Party should respond to the Teals, it's not by focusing on the Teals, it's by focusing on the people whose lives we want to improve.
Yeah.
The Teals aren't doing that, and that will become very apparent in the next 3 years. Tim Wilson showed it's not easy, but it can be done. In fact, he's the first person in history to do it, but he demonstrated that through incredibly hard work and very smart work, you can unseat probably their most capable member or former member in Zoe Daniel. So it is possible to do it. Thirdly, this ongoing mythology that they're disaffected Liberals is just untrue. Kate Chaney, was a member of the Labor Party in 2021. Monique Ryan was a member, she doesn't even hide it, frankly, was a member of the Labor Party in 2015.
Yeah.
Sally Steggall voted for the Greens, even didn't vote for Mike Baird in 2011 when 60% of the state was voting for the Liberal Party. She is a deep Green supporter. I won't talk about Sophie Scoms because she defeated me. And Allegra Spender keeps talking about all those photos of her handing out to the Liberal Party, but's never actually been able to produce one. So all of these things basically just point to the fact, and the ANU study shows that the vast majority, like something like 90% plus of people who voted Teals in 2022 were in fact Labor and Greens voters. They're not that means that what we need to do is focus on the issues of the economy, how to make people's lives more prosperous, how to give people better access to improving their lives and making their lives better. As Tony Abbott said, when we focus on climate change as a moral issue, our opponents are winning. When we focus on it as an economic and I would say engineering issue, we win. That's where we should go. While we're in coalition with the National Party, we keep fighting this rearguard action about whether climate change is real or not. An election study that was done following the 2022 election showed that while we did do very badly and continue to do very badly amongst women, their biggest issue was not actually gender representation. That's a very large issue. Their bigger issue was that they didn't believe the Liberal Party represented the values of Australians in a modern and contemporary society. Their biggest proxy data point for that was climate change and the fact that we don't seem to accept that. Now, the Morrison government delivered net zero. That was delivered by people like Katie Allen, Tim Wilson, Trevor Evans, Dave Sharma, the list goes on. But the minute we delivered that, people like in the National Party went out and started criticising and belittling net zero as a policy, further confirming to those very people that we weren't serious about climate change. They're the sorts of things that we need to change. That's the attitude that we need to have. They're the policies we need to deliver on and the values that we need to talk about.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, you did just agree with me on most of those points. But when you say, and that's fair enough, the history of Kate Chaney, some of those other Teals as well is absolutely fair to point out. But when you talk about the voter base for the Teals, are they disaffected Labor or disaffected Greens? Yeah, there's some part of that. But they can only win those Liberal-held seats by also eating substantially into the Liberal Party vote, don't you agree?
Well, it's not a matter of whether I agree or disagree with it. The ANU study into voting habits after 2022 showed that the over 90% of them, it varied a little bit electorate to electorate, but over 90% of the people voting for the Teals were previously Labor and Greens voters. That's not a criticism of the Teals, that's just where their support is coming from.
But there has to be some former Liberal support as well, though, for them to be able to win these seats and hold them, right? And look, I've only looked closely at the Wentworth vote, for example, because I live there, and Ro Knox and Allegra Spender's vote are about on par. So you're right, the Teals do get there a lot with those preference flows from Labor and the Greens as well, but there is still a substantial amount of people who used to vote Liberal who are now voting Teal.
So the 10% that is that last 10% that gets them over the line, which I think both of us can agree on, that 10% are their problem with the Liberal Party is primarily that they don't believe we represent the values or we are not in line with the values of an Australia in the 21st century, much less a party that's looking to the future and to make the future of this country and its people better. That is because we continue to talk about side issues potentially, but we haven't been true to our values. Now, unfairly, the people who were not elected in those seats, it shared their values almost to a T. And so it was really a referendum or a vote on other parts of the party that they were viewing more prominently and having more say in the direction of the Liberal Party than the members who were representing them. And that, I think, is the key issue that we have to demonstrate moving forward, that that's not actually the case.
Well, there's a lot of focus on a big chunk of the Nationals party room who wants to drop net zero and absolutely maintain nuclear the way it is. But I would say this morning to you, Jason, as well, there's not an insignificant number of members in the Liberal Party room that don't believe in net zero. They want to drop it and they believe in nuclear as well. So how do you... What do you think the Liberal Party should do? If they drop net zero, which, look, to be honest, a lot of countries aren't going to meet anyway, so it's this goal further off. It's more of a values proposition. If they drop net zero, what do you think the electoral backlash would be, or would it be pretty neutral?
Well, at the moment where we're sitting now, it wouldn't be that much. So we will continue to get elected with around 40 to 50 seats if we dump net zero as a policy. And look, net zero is not necessarily that big a deal. The point about net zero is that it's symbolic of, are you committed to doing something about climate change?
But isn't this like also, you know, fighting the ghosts of the past? You know, this was a 2013 election issue. We're now in 2025, and whilst it's still an issue on the background, this wasn't a climate change election.
No, but climate change as an issue is a piece of proxy data for that 10% of Liberals in a lot of urban seats who have stopped voting for the party because they see it as symbolic of whether the party is genuine about fixing the problems of today and tomorrow. And you're right about 2013. It has become a more prominent issue, and it is just accepted that it is something that you have to do something, it is something that any serious political party has to do something about. Now, if we get to that point, I think that's a debate we can win, because I think we're serious about fixing climate change, whereas I think our opponents are serious about subsidising vested interests who've attached themselves to the issue to enrich themselves. Dare I say, tech bro billionaires who've made loss-making investments in renewable energy companies. So that's a debate that we can win. But if we're still having this debate about whether climate change is happening or not, we look antiquated, and those voters aren't coming back until we fix that.
Jason Falinski, good to see you. For my sake, I'm glad you're outside of that party room. Can speak more freely than you could have perhaps in the past. Good to see you. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Laura. Bye.
Well, Maori Party